Welcome to today's askreddit episode from Asked and Answered. People who grew up in neighborhoods controlled by the Mafia, New York in the 60s to 80s, how was your real daily life influenced? The stuff in New York in the 70s and 80s was not really like a huge Mafia war zone, it was more like a lot of financial rackets, corrupt unions, and various schemes. Thuggy street drug gangs were far more dangerous to the average person. So no different from now. There really was a serious crime wave in the 70s and 80s. If you're not old enough, ask someone who lived through it about missing kids on milk cartons. Murder rates just in NY jumped from 4 to 30 per 100,000 people. Leaded gasoline, man. Leaded gasoline. I have friends who grew up in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. One of them told me as he was growing up there, he would see guys walking around wearing suits, kissing each other on their cheeks, doing the whole Godfather thing. They also bought up all the properties in the neighborhood, making it impossible for non-Italians to buy real estate. But they let my friend's family do it because they wanted to open a Chinese restaurant and the Italians wanted to be able to go out for Chinese. There were Genovese drugstores everywhere too, i.e. owned by the Genovese crime family, and my friends would shop there. The Mafia is a lot less active there now though. If I remember correctly, most of them have moved to New Jersey. A guy I worked with grew up in NJ in the late 70s, he would say never disrespect an old Italian man in a nice suit, you never know. I moved to Philly about a year ago, and the neighborhood I live in used to be mob territory. Apparently it was actually a lot nicer back then than it is now. No crime, streets were clean. Nobody dared do anything on mob turf without their consent, first. They kept all the illegal dealings outside of where they lived. Overall it was pretty good. The neighborhood was always clean and taken care of. NYC sanitation snowplows would clear the streets constantly during a snowstorm. The sanitation workers would manually shovel the sidewalks of our block. Meanwhile, the news is reporting people being snowed in and city plows are not showing up. It wasn't until I got older that this wasn't the norm. Also, guys in bespoke suits hanging out during traditional working hours wasn't a norm as well. My parents would tell me not to go into certain stores or walk on certain streets. At the time I didn't fully grasp the reasoning behind the rules. I thought the guys in bespoke suits were nice since they always would gather kids and family around a Mr. Softy ice cream truck for free desserts during summer evenings. I never saw any beatings or hits. I heard a lot of "get out of here kid, be smart, stay in school and drugs are for weak-minded people." I guess you can say it's more like a Bronx Tale than it was Godfather or Casino. I grew up in the neighborhood where Carlo Gambino had a house and later where John Gotti Jr. lived. It was similar to this. Nothing happened in our neighborhood. They did their thing in the city / away from where they lived. It was hilarious how none of the Mafia guys ever answered their door on Halloween. We learned to not waste our time going to their houses. John Jr. loved July 4th though. He used to give fireworks to all the kids. The parents in our neighborhood hated it, but they weren't going to say anything to him. My mother was a bartender at a restaurant / bar in Boston. Sometimes she would bring me in the late afternoons for a Shirley Temple. I would sit with the men in dapper suits. They were wonderful to me, and loved my mother. They nicknamed her Sunny. They were always genuinely interested in what was going on in my life, school, friends, activities etc. I loved to visit with them and was enamored by their kindness towards my mother. I had never seen such strong men in my life at the time, and wished one of them would be my father. I wasn't aware of their goings-on until I was around 12 years old. I was a night owl, and would eavesdrop on conversations. Her only true confidant was her sister, who worked at the same place. I heard her say that they had offered to kill my father, who had left her when I was a baby but would come over every couple weeks and beat everyone up. She was crying and said she begged them not to hurt him, but they told her they were going to break his knees. My mother killed herself some years later. A time went by, my father had an accident, Both his legs below the knees were shattered and he had to retire from the police force. I've always wondered. Wasn't expecting a real answer to this question. A girl I dated in HS, her family owned several Greek restaurants. Money laundering. When she was about to turn 18, her dad asked to speak to me and let me know it was time to stop seeing his daughter. He had always been really nice before then and I was a cocky dude back then, but you could tell by his tone, demeanor, etc. that it was in my best interest to listen. Was time to get ready for her arranged marriage. Look. This is one of those conversations where I talk and you shut up. In the military, we've always called those one-way conversations.